back with On the Record with Tiffany and Kevin, and we have a special guest, Mr. Anthony Collier. Hi, Anthony.
Hi, good afternoon.
How are you doing?
I'm great. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. I was excited to see you in. Okay, so a little bit of background about Anthony. He was general counsel to Senator John Whitmire, who serves as the chair of the Criminal Justice Committee here in Texas. And I just want to know, like, how did you feel this last session? And tell us a little bit about your background and how that influenced your experience with the Senate.
Sure. So my first legislative session was in 2017. I did the Texas Legislative Internship Program, which was started by Mickey Leland, the late Mickey Leland, and Rodney Ellis. So I was still an undergrad at the time. I was a junior at university. Then I graduated from TSU in 2018, and in my gap year, I served as a legislative director in the House to the current chair of the Texas Legislative Black Caucus, a state rep out of Missouri City. And then in 2021, I was in law school at the University of Texas, and I did the legislative lawyering clinic, which allowed me to get class credit to work at the Capitol during the session. So this was my fourth session serving as general counsel to Senator Whitmire. But the way I ended up working for him, I never applied for it. I never asked for it. Didn't even think that it was an option for me. But I had a couple job offers. I had just graduated from law school. I wasn't sure which job to take. And one of the jobs, they were like, we need an answer today. Like, they tried to hire me on the spot. And I was like, give me like 2 or 3 days to pray on it, to really seek. The Proverbs 3:6 says, acknowledge him in all your ways and he'll direct your path. That's the New King James Version. The New Living Translation version says, seek his will in all you do, and he will show you which path to take. And so I did. I sought the Lord. I prayed. I asked him, God, which job should I take? I look up and I have a missed call from Senator Whitmire. I call him back and I say, hey, Dean, sorry, I missed your call. And he's like, oh, I didn't mean to call you. It must have been a pocket dial. But while I have you on the phone, let's talk. And during that conversation, he offered me the job and convinced me to take it. So that's how I ended up serving.
Divine appointment.
Yep.
Wow.
But yep.
That's exactly, oh my gosh. Okay. So you went from a a black college, which, tell me, what was the difference between being at a black university and then going to law school?
It was fascinating because, historically speaking, TSU is the black UT. TSU created because they didn't want to allow black people to go to UT's law school. So that's the reason TSU's law school is named after Thurgood Marshall, is because he sued the state of Texas, Sweat v. Painter, on behalf of Heman Sweat. So the University of Texas School of Law accepted Heman Sweat into their law school. But when he showed up, they were like, oh, you're black. Like, I guess they saw his credentials and read his application and didn't realize that
he was black.
They were like, we didn't know a black person could be this smart. And so they were like, oh, we changed our mind. Like, you can't come to this school, but we'll create a separate but equal institution of higher learning. And so there was the Houston Junior College for Negroes. They established a law school there and built the university around it. And that was the birth of Texas Southern University. And so for me to go from Texas Southern University to the school they created to keep us out of UT, and then go to UT and be elected student body president at UT Law School, I think is just a full circle moment, and just poetic justice, and also just like God's hand at work, which I appreciate. So yeah, it was very different because in my class, at TSU, almost everybody is black. It's a beautiful, like, it's almost like being baptized in black culture. But at UT, in my class, there was it's three, they have 3 classes, right? 1Ls, 2Ls, and 3Ls. And my class is the class of 2022. It was 280 students. There were only, 12 black people, 10 black women, 2 black men in the entire class of 280. That's less than 4%. And when we talk about men, it's even worse, right? 2 out of 200 So at some moments it could feel a little isolating, but and you can feel like, you know, you're carrying the weight of the Black world on your shoulders, like trying to be a good example, because you don't want to mess it up and then they don't let the next brother in, right? So tried to do good. I wasn't perfect, but I did succeed there. Like I
You
said,
did great.
president, a student, and I worked with the dean at the time to establish a pipeline program of HBCU students to help get more Black students into the law school.
That is excellent. You did great. And you managed to, you know, we were having this discussion when we saw the Supreme Court ruling come down, but and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the discussion that I have all the time with my relatives and with friends and with other professionals is what would it have been like? Because I went to Baylor undergraduate, and one of the things that I dealt with personally in that setting was, you're in college for the first time, but on top of that is all of the racialization of that environment. So you're dealing with people trying to treat you like you're not smart enough to be there. Like you got there, it wasn't your merit that got you there, and you just got there because of affirmative action, or they just gave you a spot. You didn't earn your spot, and you earned it as much as anybody else. But you're dealing with that, with the attitude about your capability. And it always seemed like I thought, man, if I would have gone to an HBCU, I might have been happier at that particular time, because I don't care what, you can go to the best schools in the country, they can't teach you to love yourself. And that's something that everybody that I have met over the years from HBCUs, they have a beautiful sense of pride and a sense of self at 22 that I did not have at 22.
Yeah, but Tiffany, along with that line, right? So something that we talk about this a lot, Anthony, about that sense of, I remember this line where a friend of mine who he went to Howard, and he'd always tell me, because I didn't know anything about historically Black college when I was your age. Didn't know, I knew what I knew at the time, right? And so, but a good friend of mine would always say, hey, they can't teach you to love yourself like we do, right? And it's and quality of education. True. But the quality of education that he received, right, just as good as mine. He went on to do law school, be extremely successful, extremely driven, right? And so that was, to me, just one of the most amazing things. I don't know if you're first generation. I didn't look first generation college student or not, but like for me, I was first generation, right? So on my branch of the genealogy tree, I was the first person to graduate high school, first person to go to college. Right. And so we were excited, but there was that sense of racialization, right, where people were saying, we don't know if you got in on your own merit. And what I thought was interesting about that whole dynamic was that the reason affirmative action was in place was because it's not because we needed help. We didn't trust the system to be fair. We did not trust the system to be fair. Right. And so as we go through this, right, and it's just two different views of the system. Right. Whereas white people will see the system as being fair, and Black people, American descendants of the formerly enslaved, the system is not going to be fair. And the story you told on the history of TSU, that proves that the system is rigged.
There has not been a time when it has been.
but the system is being rigged. So talk about your feelings around that, or was that, because to me I was never thinking about it every day, right? But when you talked about you feel like you carry the weight of all Black people on your shoulder, right? And I don't know if we should necessarily do that, but I still feel like that a lot of times when we're in different spaces. I feel like we have the weight of Black people on our shoulders, and we have to represent in those type of things. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So sometimes pressure can bust pipes, and sometimes it can make diamonds. And I think that coming in with that sense of responsibility and urgency is a large part of the reason why I did so well in law school and why I didn't allow others to define success for me. But for me, success was, finding my purpose, what it is God put me on the earth for, and to go do that. And it wasn't to be a Supreme Court clerk, right? It was to go into criminal justice reform and work on behalf of our people. But as far as, and congratulations to you on being a first generation college graduate. That's incredible. You definitely paving the way for future generations. And same here, I'm a first generation college student. And I also didn't know about HBCUs coming up. And that's something that we have to do a better job of educating our kids on, than in the history of it. The reason why I ended up going to a HBCU, I wasn't even going to go to college at first. I was at a barber shop, right? Just hanging out, waiting time as a teenager. I was selling, I think I was actually selling mixtapes at the time.
Look at you, man, hustling. I love it.
And this guy walked in. He had on full Black traditional West African attire with the hat to match. And he walked up to me, and I tried to sell him a mixtape, and he said, "You're going to regret everything that you're selling in these mixtapes. You were called to lead. God has a calling on your life, and you're wasting and misusing your influence." And I was just like, man, whatever. If you're not trying to buy a mixtape, like, you need to get on my face. He told me, read the autobiography of Malcolm X and it'll change your life. And he just walked out. And everybody in the barbershop was like, yo, what just happened? Like, we have never seen this guy before. He got on his African clothes. We have never seen nothing like that, right? We just in the country, like Maynard, Maynard, Texas. And so it was like, we've never seen nothing like that. And but God knows how to get your attention, right? That really resonated with me. And I just couldn't forget about it. So I went to the library and got the autobiography of Malcolm X, and it did change my life, and it sent me on this knowledge pursuit. It got me to read about Marcus Garvey. It got me to read about the Black Panther Party. It got me to read about the Assata Shakur, and then it led me to the Miseducation of the Negro by
Washington.
Yep, and that book is what inspired me to go to a HBCU. And so if it had not been for that encounter, right, I might not have gone to college at all, let alone went to a HBCU.
Yeah, and so talk about that, right? So one of the things that has changed my life, right? And I always say that people have to is that we have to feel connected to the country, right? And so just that whole history, right? So I probably have read X's book, autobiography, once every year. I read it once every year, right? And it always keeps me inspired. He always has these nice little, at the end of each chapter, there's a nice little summation of it, right? And one of the things that, one of the sections, I forget which chapter, where he talks about being the first and only, Black person, right? And how some people wear that with us into pride. But for us, right, the one thing that we always say, when we're the first to come through the door, what we want to make sure is that others can also come through the door, and also that we represent our people. And what we mean by that is that when a conversation that's going to impact our people is going on, we want to make sure that we vigilantly advocate for our people on behalf of our people, because we know that if we represent Black people, everybody else is going to get the benefit from that, right? We see that from the 13th, 14th Amendments, right? It wasn't Black people who used the 14th Amendment first. It was Asians who used it, right? That's kind of poetic given the recent ruling, right? And so what is that like when you're in the circles that you're in, to make sure that you're advocating for Black people in a way to make sure that we're heard and our side of the story is heard? Yeah,
what you said is so true. And about like some Black people being like, oh, like bragging. I'm the only one on my job. I'm the only one.
You're just like, really? This is what you got to say? You need to get up out of my face right now.
But it tied perfectly back into the Supreme Court decision because Uncle Clarence, he benefited from affirmative action, and then he climbed up that ladder, and then he turned around and pulled the ladder up to make sure nobody could climb. That's just one of the most disgusting and despicable things. I don't want to just put it on him, right? Well, because everybody who voted in favor of it is wrong. He's wrong too. Wrong as well, because white people have had affirmative action for the past 400 years. Like you said earlier, like affirmative action was to right or wrong because we were qualified. We just were not getting that opportunity, and they were getting in oftentimes over more qualified black people because of systemic racism. Yeah. So the fact that they would turn around and say, you know, and remove that remedy is egregious. And going back to what you said about every other race benefiting from the work we put in, it's true. A rising tide lifts all votes, and also anytime you lift the foundation of a being, the entire thing rises, right? And black people are the backbone and the foundation of this nation. We built this nation, and another example of that that's very egregious is right here in Texas with HUB. So HUB stands for Historically Underutilized Businesses. And this is legislation that Senator West, there's only 2 black senators in Texas, right? There's a senator from Houston, who is currently Boris Miles, and a senator from Dallas, which is currently Royce West. And in the 80s, Royce West spearheaded legislation because, the state gives out contracts to businesses, and they were systemically refusing contracts to black businesses. So he passed legislation that said the state of Texas automatically has to give a certain amount of their contracts to historically underutilized businesses, right? But of course, that doesn't just include black people. That includes veterans. That includes Asians. That includes Hispanics. That includes white women. And when white women are getting over 90% of all HUB utilization that was put in place because of black people were getting discriminated against. And oftentimes it's the wealthy white man putting the business in their wife's name and just getting more of the money that we fought for. We're getting like less than a crumb, and we're the one who put the sweat equity in. We're the ones who put the blood, sweat, and tears in to get the legislation passed. And it's just that's just kind of a microcosm of what's been going on historically in this nation, from the Civil Rights Act to the Voting Rights Act to the Fair Housing Act to the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment.
All right. I like that. Let's leave it right there, Tiffany. And we will be back with On the Record with Kevin and Tiffany. And we have the immaculate, the awesome Anthony Collier here on 9:30 a.m. The Answer, home of conservative talk radio.